On January 9th, 1913, in Yorba Linda, California, America's most significant president was born. Richard Milhous Nixon, the future 37th President of the United States of America, had been brought into this world. Nixon was by far the most historically significant President of the United States of America for the lack of trust that he instilled in the American public. The American public had no trust for the American government for Nixon's involvement in the Kent State Massacre, the infamous Watergate scandal, and his resignation from office in 1974. Firstly, the Kent State Massacre. On May the 4th, 1970, the student protesting had become out of control. The students were protesting Nixon's previous action on April 30th to invade Cambodia in the Vietnam War. Nixon's decision was then to send the National Guard to Kent State University in Ohio to deal with the protesters. However, this was a grave error, for the Guard ended up killing 4 protesters and injuring 9. All casualties were caused due to bullets shot from the National Guard's rifles. This caused a national uproar and was the beginning of the national distrust of Richard Nixon. This was the first time in American history when the American military had to fight and kill their own people. Secondly, Richard Nixon was also involved in the infamous Watergate scandal that created a national concern in the government from the American public. The Watergate scandal took place on June 17, 1974, and what happened was that 5 men that were hired by the American government had to break into a hotel room and retrieve tapes that were hidden there. On these tapes held confidential information regarding Nixon and many other famous political figures. However, this plan failed and the men were caught. Once they were caught and tried, the conspiracy was exposed, and this revealed many secrets about the government that they tried to hide from the public. Just like Kent State, the lack of trust that the American people had between their government grew, and the amount of hatred that the American people had for their government hadn't been this strong since the British ruled in the 17th century. Lastly was Nixon's resignation. On August 9, 1974, Richard M. Nixon resigned from being the 37th President of the United States of America. He is the only president in U.S. history to have done so. Nixon didn't just resign because of the embarrassment that was caused because of the Watergate scandal, but Nixon had to resign because of all the negative change that he brought on towards the United States. By the time Nixon left, during the 80s, the 90s, and the new millennium, the U.S. became a better place, not because of the change that he brought onto this country, but the change that he prevented by resigning with 2 years left on his term. In conclusion, Richard Nixon was by far the most historically significant president of the United States, not for the positive change that he brought onto the country, but for the negative change and the lack of trust that he instilled within his country. If it weren't for Richard Nixon, the 60s and 70s would have been a much different place in America.
10 soldiers and Nixon coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I